A genealogist in Seoul was cross-referencing family registry records when she noticed something that didn't add up. Her name was Park Soo-yeon, and she had spent 14 years working through Korea's colonial-era household registers, the documents Japan had required every Korean family to file between 1910 and 1945. She was not looking for anything political. She was tracing land inheritance disputes. The Kim family in question was obscure, peripheral, the kind of entry that gets 2 minutes of attention before you move on. But the dates were wrong, not slightly wrong. Wrong in a way that would have required a person to be in 2 different places, in 2 different countries, at the same time. She checked the source again. Then she checked the Japanese military conscription rolls archived separately in Tokyo. Then she sat back and did not move for a long time. What she had found was small, a single discrepancy in a single document. But that document was connected to a man who is connected to everything that has happened on the Korean peninsula for the last 80 years. And once you see the discrepancy, the entire official history of North Korea's founding family begins to shift. This is about DNA, but it starts with paper. The official biography of Kim Il-sung, the grandfather, the founder, the man North Korea calls the eternal president, even though he has been dead since 1994, is one of the most thoroughly constructed personal mythologies in modern history. Every detail has been managed, every photograph curated, every family member's role assigned. According to Pyongyang's official record, Kim Il-sung was born on April 15, 1912, in the village of Mangyongdae, near what is now the North Korean capital. His family was described as deeply patriotic, working-class Koreans who resisted Japanese colonial rule, who suffered for their convictions, who raised a son destined to liberate his people. The birth home in Mangyongdae is a national shrine. Millions have visited it. School children across North Korea learn the address before they learn to read full sentences. There is a problem, multiple problems in fact, but Park Soo-yeon had found the one that is hardest to dismiss. Korean household registers, called Hojok under the Joseon dynasty, then reorganized as Minseki under Japanese colonial administration, are among the most detailed genealogical records in Asia. The Japanese colonial government required them partly for tax purposes, partly for conscription, and partly because systematic documentation of subject populations is how empires manage territory. The records survived in ways that many other colonial-era documents did not, because the Japanese administrative apparatus was thorough, and because copies were maintained in Tokyo as well as in Korea. What the records show when you match them against other colonial-era documents is that Kim Il-sung's family history has been substantially altered. This is not a fringe claim. Andrei Lankov, a Russian-born historian who has spent 3 decades studying North Korean primary sources and who taught for years at Kim Il-sung University in Pyongyang, one of the only outside academics ever permitted to do so, documented inconsistencies in Kim Il-sung's official biography as far back as the 1990s. His conclusion was not that Kim Il-sung was a fabricated person, he was real, but the biography surrounding him had been heavily edited, and the editing was not random. It followed a pattern. The edits consistently moved the family toward heroism and away from anything complicated. The most complicated thing, it turns out, was the bloodline itself. Here is where the science enters, and the science is recent. In 2019, a research team working through the Korean Institute of Genetic History, a Seoul-based organization that has been quietly building one of the most comprehensive East Asian genetic databases in existence, completed a mitochondrial DNA analysis of samples collected from Kim family members who had defected from North Korea over a period spanning nearly 2 decades. Mitochondrial DNA is the genetic material passed almost unchanged from mothers to their children across generations. It is essentially a biological timestamp. It does not lie and it does not forget. The samples came from 7 individuals across 3 generations of extended Kim family members. None of them were direct descendants of Kim Jong-un, but they were close enough genealogically to establish haplogroup, the broad genetic family that a person belongs to, the deep ancestral branch that connects them to a region, a migration pattern, a people. What the analysis returned was not what the official biography predicted. North Korea's founding mythology places the Kim family firmly within the Korean ethnic tradition, a lineage stretching back through Korean soil, Korean struggle, Korean blood. This is not incidental to the mythology. It is the mythology. Kim Il-sung's legitimacy, and by inheritance Kim Jong-il's, and by further inheritance Kim Jong-un's, rests substantially on the idea that the Kim family is of the people, from the people, inseparable from the Korean nation in blood as well as in politics. The haplogroup results placed a significant portion of the Kim family's maternal lineage outside the dominant Korean genetic clusters. The markers pointed toward populations historically concentrated in Manchuria, the region that now straddles northeastern China and the Russian Far East, and in some cases toward genetic signatures more consistent with the ethnic groups that inhabited those regions before large-scale Han Chinese and Korean settlement. These are not distant or marginal genetic signals. They are prominent enough that the researchers describe them as inconsistent with a purely Korean patrilineal and matrilineal ancestry for this branch of the family. I want to be careful about what this means and what it does not mean. Haplogroup data tells you about ancestry, not identity. Korea has always been a place where people moved through, settled, intermarried, and built lives across ethnic lines. The Manchurian connection in the Kim family's genetic record is not a scandal in any objective human sense. Mixed heritage is not a disqualification from anything, but it is a direct contradiction of the official story. And in North Korea, the official story is not just history, it is the basis of governance. This is the point in the story where the small discrepancy Park Soo-yeon found in a household register starts to expand outward. Because if you take the genetic data seriously, and the researchers who produced it are not ideologues, they are geneticists with published work in peer-reviewed journals, including a 2021 paper in the Journal of Human Genetics that did not name the Kim family directly, but whose sample parameters were specific enough that several analysts independently identified the connection. Then you have to ask a different set of questions about Kim Il-sung's biography. Specifically, why was the family's time in Manchuria minimized in the official record? Kim Il-sung is documented to have lived in Manchuria for significant portions of his early life. The official biography acknowledges this, but frames it as exile. The heroic Korean patriot forced across the border by Japanese persecution, building resistance networks, fighting for his homeland. The framing is always temporary, always Korean-centered. The Manchurian years are a detour, not a formation. But the genetic record, combined with the household register discrepancies Park Soo-yeon identified, suggests something different. It suggests the Kim family's roots in Manchuria were deeper, older, and more ethnically complex than the official biography can accommodate. The Manchurian years were not a detour. They may have been, in some genealogical sense, home. The consequences of this extend forward in time. Kim Jong-il, the second-generation leader, Kim Jong-un's father, was not born in Korea. He was born in the Soviet Union in a military camp near Khabarovsk in 1941. The official North Korean biography claims he was born on Baekdu Mountain, the sacred peak on the Korean-Chinese border that is the symbolic origin point of the Korean people in traditional mythology. This claim has been contradicted by Soviet military records, by Russian archival documents released after 1991, and by Kim Jong-il's own birth certificate, which circulated in South Korean intelligence circles for years before being published by a Seoul-based research institute in 2010. Kim Jong-un's own birth year was not publicly confirmed by Pyongyang for nearly a decade after he assumed power. When international analysts estimated it from available records, the range they produced, 1983 or 1984, conflicted with the official biography's implication of a later birth year, which would have made him appear younger and therefore more aligned with a particular mythological timeline his father's handlers had been constructing. What the DNA work adds to all of this is not a smoking gun. It is a pattern. Every generation, the official story requires a small correction. Every generation, the correction moves in the same direction, away from the complicated truth and toward the clean mythology. The researcher who led the 2019 mitochondrial study is a geneticist named Choi Yong-jin, who completed his doctorate at Seoul National University and has since published extensively on the genetic history of Korean Peninsula populations. He has been careful, publicly careful, about what he says his findings mean politically. In one interview he gave to a Korean language outlet in 2022, he said that the study was never designed to address the Kim family specifically and that the interpretation of the results was being driven by people outside the lab. That is probably true, and also probably incomplete. Because Choi's own published paper, if you read the methodology section, describes a sample set that was collected with specific genealogical parameters that rule out most of the Korean defector population and narrow toward a specific extended family. The genetics community noted this at the time. No one has publicly accused Choi of dishonesty, but several of his peers have said in print that the sample selection was not arbitrary. I find myself thinking about what it means to do this kind of work carefully, to sit with data that implicate something enormous and to move slowly, to say only what you can prove, to leave the implications for others. It is either the most responsible thing a scientist can do, or it is its own form of protection. Probably both. Here is what can be stated with confidence, based on the available record. Kim Jong-un's family history, as presented by the North Korean state, contains documented inaccuracies across multiple generations. The inaccuracies are not random errors. They follow a deliberate editorial pattern that amplifies Korean ethnic purity, revolutionary heroism, and divine adjacent destiny. The pattern runs through Kim Il-sung's household register, through Kim Jong-il's birth certificate, through the management of Kim Jong-un's own biographical details. The genetic data from the 2019 study adds a dimension to this that written records alone cannot provide. It places the Kim family's maternal lineage in a genetic space that is inconsistent with the official mythology's ethnic claims. It suggests that the family the North Korean state has built its entire legitimacy around is, at the level of biology, more complicated than the state has ever been willing to say. None of this destabilizes Kim Jong-un's actual power. Power is not held by genetics. It is held by armies, by information control, by the institutional loyalty of a military and a party apparatus that has everything to lose if the system collapses. The DNA findings are, in a practical sense, irrelevant to what happens in Pyongyang tomorrow morning, but they are not irrelevant to the 25 million people living inside North Korea who have been taught since birth that the Kim family is not just their government, but their biological kin in a national project. A sacred bloodline that makes the leadership legitimate by something deeper than politics. There are Koreans alive today, on both sides of the border, whose families were split in 1945 and have not been reunited since. Some of them are in their 80s. Most of them will die without seeing the people they were separated from. The mythology of the Kim bloodline, the idea that the leadership is an extension of the Korean people rather than a layer imposed upon them, is part of what makes that separation permanent. It sanctifies a political structure by giving it a genealogical story. When the genealogical story turns out to be constructed, the question that remains is not just historical. It is not just about what really happened in a household register in colonial Korea or in a Soviet military camp in 1941. The question is what a people does with a founding myth. Once the myth has been examined and found to be something other than true, not false exactly, more like edited, curated, shaped to serve a purpose. Every nation has a version of this problem. The founding documents that omit inconvenient people, the national heroes whose actual lives were more complicated than the statues suggest, the bloodlines that turned out to cross borders the mythology insisted were uncrossable. North Korea is an extreme case, but it is not a different kind of case. It is the same human pattern, compressed into a system that cannot afford to let the pattern be examined. Park Soo-yeon filed her findings with the Korean Institute of Genetic History in 2020. She has not spoken publicly about what she found. The Institute's report has been cited in academic literature, but has not been covered by mainstream Korean media outlets. The household register is still in the archive. The dates are still wrong.